He told me my doubts were selfish. He said real love doesn't hesitate. He said all of this while a woman on the other side of the world was already counting the days until he came home to her. I want to tell you exactly how it happened. Not the screaming version. Not the version where I fall apart on the kitchen floor. The real version, where I stayed quiet, kept my phone close, and waited for the right moment. Because the right moment came, and it came in front of everyone. His name was Tarek. I met him at a language exchange event in the city, one of those evenings where people sit in pairs and practice their second languages over bad coffee and hopeful small talk. He was learning German. I was curious about Arabic. We swapped numbers under the fluorescent lights of a rented community hall, and I remember thinking his laugh was too easy, too immediate, like he had rehearsed it. I filed that thought away and then ignored it completely because he was also warm and attentive and knew how to ask questions that made you feel seen. That was his real skill, I would learn, making you feel seen. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. 14 months of video calls when he was traveling, of him cooking for me in my apartment, of him meeting my sister and my parents, of him crying once, during a film about a man separated from his family. I believed every single thing he showed me. Why wouldn't I? The evidence was consistent. The story he told held together perfectly. The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small stone. He said he had chosen it because I once mentioned I found large engagement rings performative. He had remembered. That detail alone made me say yes before he finished the sentence. We got engaged in October. The engagement party was scheduled for the following February at my parents' house because my mother had insisted on hosting, and Tariq had agreed immediately, enthusiastically, with that easy laugh. I did not know yet that the party date mattered to him for reasons that had nothing to do with celebration. The first thing that felt wrong was the timeline. About 3 weeks after the engagement, Tarek started talking about the civil ceremony. Not the wedding, just the legal registration. He wanted it done quickly. He had reasons. His residency permit was in a transitional category. A registered marriage would simplify the paperwork significantly. He framed it practically, almost apologetically, the way you explain a bureaucratic inconvenience to someone you love. I said I understood, but I also said I wanted to wait until after the engagement party, so the family could be part of the process. He agreed. Then he brought it up again 2 weeks later. Then again, the week after that. Each time the language shifted slightly. The first time it was a practical suggestion. The second time it was a gentle preference. The third time he used the word selfish. He said, "I don't understand why you're making this so complicated. It's just paperwork. Unless you're not actually committed." I remember the exact light in the room when he said that. Late afternoon, the kitchen window throwing a long pale rectangle across the floor. I was holding a coffee cup and I set it down very carefully on the counter, and I looked at him and I said, "I am committed. I just want to do things in the right order." He softened immediately. He apologized. He held my face in his hands and said he was stressed about the permit situation and he was sorry for taking it out on me. I accepted the apology and I picked up my coffee cup and I went to the window and I looked out at the street below and I thought, that was not a man who was stressed. That was a man who was managing me. There is a difference. I had not always known the difference. I knew it now. I did not say anything. I did not change my behavior. I smiled the same way, cooked the same meals, answered his calls at the same times. But I started paying attention differently. I noticed that his phone was always face down on the table. I noticed that when a message arrived, he would glance at the screen with a very specific microexpression, a small tightening around the eyes. Before turning it over, I noticed that he was always the one to suggest we go out rather than stay in, which meant his phone stayed in his jacket pocket rather than on a surface near me. I noticed that when I asked about his family in detail, specific questions about his mother's health or his brother's new job, details he had mentioned in passing, he would answer, smoothly but briefly, and then redirect. He was good at redirecting. He would ask me something personal in return, something that would make me talk for 10 minutes, and by the time I finished, we were somewhere else entirely. I started writing things down, not in a dramatic way, just a small notes file on my phone, time-stamped, recording the inconsistencies. The date he said he had last spoken to his mother versus the date he mentioned a conversation about her surgery. The city he said he was in during a work trip versus a location tag that appeared briefly on a photo he posted and then deleted within an hour. Small things, but small things accumulate. The real break came from a direction I had not anticipated. I have a friend named Dina. She grew up in Lebanon and speaks Arabic as her first language, and she has known me since university, and she has never once in 15 years pretended to like someone she didn't trust. She met Tarek twice. Both times, she was polite, but afterward, she would change the subject when I brought him up, which was her version of a warning. About 6 weeks before the engagement party, Dina came to my apartment for dinner. Tarek was travelling for work. We opened wine, and she sat at my kitchen table, and she said, without preamble, "I need to show you something, and I need you to not panic." She had been on a social platform that I didn't use, one that was popular in certain communities in the region Tariq was from. She had searched his name out of curiosity or out of instinct. She wasn't entirely sure which. She had found a profile that was not entirely private. A woman had commented on one of his photos with a phrase in Arabic that Dina translated for me word by word. The phrase meant something close to, "Counting the days, my love. Come back to me." The comment was 4 months old. We had been engaged for 3 weeks at that point. We had been together for over a year before that. I sat with that for a long moment. The wine was open on the table. Neither of us touched it. I asked Dina to help me look further. She did. What we found over the next 2 evenings was not ambiguous. There was a woman. Her name was Noor. She and Tarek had a relationship that appeared, based on the visible fragments of their digital life together, to have been ongoing for at least 2 years. There were photos of them at a family gathering. There was a comment from what appeared to be his aunt, addressed to both of them together, that Dina translated carefully and quietly. The comment used a word that meant something like soon, and another word that in context meant something like official. He was not just having an affair, he was managing 2 parallel tracks, one here, one there. The one here came with a residency permit attached. The one there was the one he intended to keep. I asked Dina to translate everything she could find and send it to me in writing. She did. I saved every screenshot, every translation, every timestamp. I did not call Tarek. I did not change my expression the next time I saw him. I smiled, and I asked about his trip, and I listened to his answer, and I thought, you have no idea what I know. That feeling was not satisfying. It was cold and precise, and it kept me moving forward. The second layer was the travel records. I had access to our shared calendar because we had set it up together early in the relationship. The kind of practical romantic gesture that feels like trust. I went back through it and cross-referenced his stated locations with his actual bank statements, which I had seen partially because we had once discussed combining finances, and he had shown me a summary as a gesture of openness. 3 of his work trips in the past year did not match. The cities he told me he was in did not match the transaction locations on the statements. The gaps were small, a day here, 2 days there, but they pointed consistently in one direction. He had been home, his home country, not for work, for something else. I printed those pages. I put them in a folder with Dina's translations and the screenshots. Then the third layer arrived, and I had not gone looking for it. I don't know how Noor found me. I don't know if she traced the same trail from her side, or if someone told her, or if she had been suspicious for longer than I had. What I know is that one morning, about 10 days before the engagement party, I woke up to a message from an account I didn't recognize, written in Arabic, with an automated translation underneath. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was not. She said she had been with Tarek for 2 years. She said she had believed they were working toward a future together. She said she had recently learned that he was engaged to someone in Europe, and she needed to know if it was true. She said she was not angry at me. She said she was asking because she deserved to know the truth. I read that message 3 times. I thought about a woman on the other side of the world, sitting with her own coffee, her own morning light, her own version of the same confusion I had been carrying for weeks. I wrote back. I confirmed everything. I told her what I knew. I told her about the permit, about the timeline, about his urgency around the civil ceremony. I told her I was sorry. I told her she had done nothing wrong. She wrote back 1 sentence. Dina translated it for me. It meant, neither have you. I added her message to the folder. The engagement party was on a Saturday in February. My parents' house, my mother's cooking, my father's good wine, my sister and her husband, 4 of my closest friends, including Dina, and a handful of Tarek's acquaintances from the city, people he had met through work and language groups, and the general social architecture he had built here. He had invited them himself. He had been enthusiastic about the guest list. He wanted witnesses. He wanted the party to be a social fact, a moment that could be cited, a step toward the life he was constructing. I let him plan it. I contributed the details. He couldn't control. The venue, the family, the people who actually knew me. He arrived at my parents' house an hour before the guests. He was wearing a new jacket. He had brought flowers for my mother, which she accepted with genuine warmth, because she liked him. Most people liked him. That was part of the problem, and also, in a way, part of the solution. I watched him move through the house, shaking my father's hand, laughing with my brother-in-law, helping carry chairs. He was performing. He was very good at it. But I had been watching the performance for weeks now, from outside it, and once you're outside it, you cannot go back in. Dina arrived early. She found me in the kitchen and looked at my face and said nothing, just touched my arm once. I had told her what I planned to do. She had said, "Are you sure?" I had said yes. She had said, "Then I'm here." The guests arrived in the early evening. The house filled with noise and warmth and the smell of my mother's food. Tariq was at the center of it, easy and laughing. The man everyone was glad to meet. I watched people warm to him in real time, and I thought, this is the last time he gets to do this. Not because I was taking something from him, because he had already taken it from himself. About an hour into the evening, my father called for quiet. He was going to make a toast. This was the plan, the normal plan, the one Tarek expected. My father would speak. There would be champagne. There would be photographs. There would be the official social confirmation of the engagement. My father stood up, and he looked at me, and I gave him a very small nod. He was not surprised by the nod. I had spoken to my parents 2 days before the party. I had sat with them at their kitchen table, and I had shown them the folder. My father had gone very still and very quiet. My mother had cried briefly, and then stopped crying, and said, "What do you need from us?" I had told them. They had agreed. My father began his toast. He said he was grateful to have everyone here. He said he had something to say before the champagne. He said that a parent's job was to protect their child, and that sometimes protection looked like celebration, and sometimes it looked like something else. Tarek's smile had not moved. He was still holding his glass. He was still performing. My father looked directly at him and said, "I've been shown some information about you that I'd like to give you the chance to address, in front of the people who are here tonight." The smile cracked, just slightly, just at the edges. He recovered immediately, but I had seen it, and Dina had seen it, and my sister, who was watching him like a hawk, had seen it. He said, "I'm not sure what you mean." I stepped forward. I had the folder in my hand. I had left it on the side table when the guests arrived, and I had been aware of it all evening, the way you are aware of something important in a room. I said, "I'd like to show everyone something." I did not make a speech. I had specifically decided not to make a speech, because a speech is about emotion, and I did not want this to be about emotion. I wanted it to be about facts. I opened the folder. I had organized it into 3 sections. The first section was the translated screenshots, the messages between Tarek and Noor, the comment from his aunt, the photos from the family gathering. I had printed them large and clearly. I passed them to my father, who passed them to the nearest guest, who looked at them and passed them on. I watched the folder move through the room. Tariq said, "Those are taken out of context." I said, "The second section is the travel records, the dates he told me he was working in other cities, and the transaction records showing he was actually in his home country." Someone in the room made a sound, not a dramatic sound, a small involuntary sound of understanding. Tarek said, "This is an ambush. This is completely unfair." I said, "The third section is a message from Noor, the woman he has been with for 2 years. She found me. She wanted to know if the engagement was real. I told her it was. She told me she had been told they were working toward a future together. She also told me she had been told the marriage here was purely administrative, and that he would come home to her once his papers were sorted. The room was completely quiet. Tariq put his glass down. He looked around the room and I watched him calculate. He looked at the guests from his side of the room, his acquaintances, the social witnesses he had invited. He looked at my family. He looked at me. He said, "You've humiliated me in front of everyone." I said, "You built a plan that required two women to not compare notes. We compared notes." He said, "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The permit situation is real. I was going to fix everything once I was stable here. I love you. This doesn't change that," my mother said quietly and very clearly from across the room. "Please leave my house." He looked at her. He looked at my father. He looked at his acquaintances who were looking at the floor or at the folder or at the wall, anywhere but at him. He tried one more time. He turned to me and said, "Everything I felt for you was real." I looked at him. I thought about the ring on my finger. I thought about the coffee cup I had set down carefully on the counter the day he called me selfish for wanting to wait. I thought about Noor sitting somewhere far away, reading my message in the morning light. I took the ring off. I placed it on the table next to his empty glass. I said, "Then you should have been honest." He left. Not immediately. There was a period of about 4 minutes that I can only describe as a man discovering that none of his usual tools worked anymore. He tried anger. He tried reasonableness. He tried an appeal to my father, which was a significant miscalculation. He tried addressing the room generally, which is the move of someone who has lost the room. Then he left. The door closed and the house was quiet for a moment. And then my mother said, "I'm going to heat up the food." And she walked into the kitchen, and that was exactly the right thing to do. The guests who had come on his behalf left shortly after, politely, quickly, without making it a bigger moment than it already was. I didn't blame them. They had been used as props in someone else's performance, and they hadn't known it. The people who stayed were the ones who mattered. My parents, my sister and her husband, Dina, and 3 other friends who helped clear glasses and sat with me until the evening had softened into something more ordinary. Dina sat next to me on the sofa and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. I said, "Empty," but the clean kind of empty, like a room after you've moved the furniture out. She said, "That's a good kind." I said, "I know." The aftermath was not dramatic. That surprised me in a way. I had expected more noise, more fallout, more of him, but he had lost the things he needed to maintain the performance. He had lost the host family, which meant he had lost the social legitimacy he had been building here. He had lost the path to the civil registration, which meant his permit situation was now entirely his own problem to solve. He had lost the controlled narrative because enough people had seen the folder and heard the room go quiet. I heard through a mutual acquaintance, about a month later, that he had left the country. I didn't spend much time trying to confirm it. Noor and I exchanged a few more messages. Her German was better than I expected. My Arabic was worse than I would have liked. We used the translation function, and we were patient with each other. She told me she had ended things with him the same week I had messaged her. She told me she had spent a long time blaming herself for not seeing it sooner. I told her the same thing. We agreed that the blame was not ours to carry. I still have the folder, not because I need it, but because I spent a significant amount of time and care putting it together. And it feels wrong to discard something you built with precision even when its purpose is finished. Maybe one day I'll shred it. Not yet. The ring I left on the table I didn't take back. My mother found it the next morning and asked what I wanted to do with it. I said to donate it. She said she would handle it. I don't know where it went. I'm glad I don't know. I want to say something about the urgency because I think it was the most important part of the whole structure. When someone loves you, they want things to go well for you. They want you to feel safe and considered. They might be impatient sometimes. They might push sometimes. But when you express a genuine need, they adjust. They don't call your needs selfish. They don't make your hesitation into a character flaw. The urgency Tariq brought to the civil ceremony was not the urgency of love. It was the urgency of a deadline. There was a permit renewal coming. There was a timeline. There was a plan. And I was a component in the plan. And components are not supposed to ask questions. He dressed the urgency in the language of love. because that was the most efficient way to manage me. Real love doesn't hesitate. If you loved me, you wouldn't make this so complicated. I don't understand why you need more time. I have thought about this a lot since then. The way urgency can be weaponized, the way pressure can be disguised as passion, the way someone can make your reasonable caution feel like a personal failure. I was not wrong to want to wait. I was not wrong to want the process to have meaning beyond paperwork. I was not wrong to feel that something was off, even when I couldn't name it yet. The feeling that something is off is information. It is not anxiety. It is not insecurity. It is not selfishness. It is your own intelligence trying to tell you something before you have the evidence to back it up. Next time, I will listen to it sooner. It has been about 7 months now. I went back to the language exchange group twice, not to meet anyone, just because I had genuinely enjoyed learning, and I didn't want to let his choices take that from me too. I have a different teacher now, an older woman who is extremely strict about pronunciation and has no patience for excuses, and I find that I like her very much. I have not been in a hurry. I have been, if anything, deliberately unhurried. I take my time with things. I let processes unfold at their own pace. I ask questions, and I wait for the answers. And if the answers don't hold together, I ask follow-up questions. I am not closed off. I am not bitter. Bitterness requires you to stay in the moment of the wound, and I have moved past that moment. I am somewhere else now, somewhere quieter. The engagement party that was supposed to be the beginning of a constructed future became something else entirely. It became the moment I found out what I was actually dealing with and what I was capable of and who was in my corner. My parents, who sat with me at their kitchen table and looked at the evidence and said, "What do you need from us?" Without flinching. Dina, who found something she didn't want to find and brought it to me anyway because she respected me enough to tell me the truth. My sister, who watched him across the room all evening with an expression I now recognize as the face of someone who already knew. I had good people. I still have good people. That matters more than I had perhaps understood before. The coffee cup is still on my kitchen counter. The same one I set down carefully that afternoon when he called me selfish. I kept it. I use it every morning. It is just a cup, but it reminds me of the exact moment I stopped being managed and started paying attention. I think that is a useful thing to remember over coffee. Some mornings I think about what would have happened if I had let him rush me, if I had agreed to the quick civil ceremony, if I had let the urgency override the hesitation, if I had signed the papers before the party, before Dina's evening at my kitchen table, before Noor's message in the early morning. He would have had what he needed. I would have had a legal marriage to someone who was already planning his exit. The unraveling would have come eventually, but it would have been slower and more expensive and more entangled. Instead, I waited. Not because I was suspicious, but because I believed that love should be able to withstand the time it takes to do something properly. That turned out to be the right instinct. For the wrong reasons, at exactly the right moment. I am not looking for someone who moves fast. I am not looking for someone who needs me to move fast. I am looking for someone for whom the pace of things is not a pressure point at all. Someone who finds the unhurried version of building something together to be the only version worth having. That person exists. I'm not in a rush to find them. That is, I think, the point. If you recognize the shape of this, the urgency that doesn't feel quite like love, the pressure dressed up as passion, the hesitation that gets reframed as a character flaw, I want to say this clearly. Your caution is not the problem. Your questions are not the problem. The person who needs you to stop asking questions is the problem. Pay attention to the small things. Write them down if you need to. Find your Dina. Keep your folder. And if the moment comes, stay calm. The calmer you are, the less they can work with. The less they can work with, the more clearly everyone else can see what is actually happening. You don't need to rage. You need to be prepared. There is a significant difference, and the difference is everything.